Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, and today we're going to do a tube fly version of the black-nosed dace. Now, if you've not seen that fly before, this is what it looks like. It's a nice little pattern, very effective for trout, steelhead, other species. Bass will take it as well. It imitates pretty well, your typical bait fish. So it's a simple, relatively simple pattern to tie, and as I say, it's got a legend for being very effective. So let's get going and see what we're doing here. I've got this aluminum tube here in, it's 3/32 and it's 1.5 inches long. Our thread is black, 6 knot. It's Vivas. The tail is just going to be red yarn, just right your granny's knitting yarn, right? Our tag here and our body, the body's uni mylar, the tag is uni French and an oval. We're using silver in both cases. Our wing is composed of black, white, and brown bucktail. We're going to be using these stick-on eyes. You could paint them on if you wanted to. I'm lazy. I stick them on. I'm going to be using this Danville ultrafine monofilament to help keep the eyes on. Start your thread at the front. Just get it going. Now we're going to tie on our red wool, and we're going to put it the full length of the body, just so it helps keep the body even. And we don't need it very long, so about to the knurling on my vise is good enough. I'm going to put a couple of turns in there to hold it. We'll trim off the excess in a minute. Now we're going to put on our mylar. Use more, at least a foot of it, maybe more. This is a thick body, so you're going to need a fair bit of mylar here. And the same for the rib. Be generous. Then when you're tying tubes, it's so easy to run out of material. You thought you cut off enough, and you didn't. Now hold everything up. In fact, let's trim that off. It's getting in the way. And then just hold everything up. Keep everything on top. Now for our mylar. Make sure you're in touching turns so it doesn't show any red or black through that. And put it nice and tight. One of the advantages of doing this tight over a relatively uneven body is it creates these spectral highlights. I know the tendency is to try and make it nice and smooth, but there's some advantage to having this sort of bumpy body that creates all these reflections. You can see the amount of mylar I've only got left. I don't have much left. It shows you how much we end up using on a thick body like this. Okay, now for our rib. Turn at the back and come forward. Now, my yarn is probably a little long. I'm going to trim it to about here. Doesn't hurt to leave it long, then, fix it afterwards, and I take some of the curl out of the yarn, fluff it up a little bit. When you put the junction tubing on, that'll create a little kick up, but it won't be a big deal. Okay, now we're ready for our bucktail, and we start with white, and I would recommend not using very much at all. This will build up bulk quickly. We're using 3 colors of bucktail here. So I'm just going to trim off a small amount and stack it. When you're working with small amounts of bucktail, it pays to stack. I'm not a big fan of stacking usually for streamers, but when you're working with small amounts, it helps to keep the profile going, because it's very easy to end up with a very thin end, and when you're dealing with a small amount of bucktail, that's an issue. Okay, we're not going to go too far back. Oh, about there. So bring our thread to the front. Some soft wraps. That looks good. Bind it down. You notice I'm going to trim afterwards. I do that because I use the waist here on the end to help me adjust. Makes it easier. Okay, bring it back, and a couple of soft wraps in the back to keep it laying down. Now we put on our black, and the black is just a hint. It's just to create like a lateral line effect. So don't go heavy with the black. And if you find you've got too much, pull some out. There we go. And again, stack it. Put it the same length as the white. A couple of easy wraps just to hold it. Make sure it's even on both sides. And we bind it down a little tighter. Now I've made a little bit of a mistake here. Might as well show it to you. I could edit this out, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it in. I took my binds a little too close to the front. So you can see I'm crowding up, and I'm going to have a little bit of bucktail, ragged end of bucktail showing. It's not a big deal. But if you want to be really pretty, you could do something about that. Finally, the brown. And it's not the world's best brown. This is the clump that can be the largest if you want. If you want to build up a bit of bulk, I would do it with the brown. And I'll just pinch loop that in place. Couple of wraps, pull it up. And we want about the same amount. It should go a little bit more that way. That's good. Yep. Now it's a little bit crowded, so I'm just going to come in here and see if I can trim some of this off a little bit. Give myself some room. We'll leave this bit in. I've crowded the head a little bit too much. Got a little bit gung-ho trying to keep the overall length of the head down. And as you can see, I've got some problems with the room. We'll manage. You have to be careful you don't skid the thread off the end of the head. At the end of the tube, I should say. Okay, I'm not going to risk it anymore. I'm just going to leave it like that. I don't mind leaving the odd mistake in. It shows you how to recover from the mistake and, not get too ugly. It's still a usable head. So we'll whip finish it, but I'm going to whip finish towards the back of the head rather than the front because it's likely to skid off. Okay, now we put on our stick-on eyes. Use our bodkin, come in, just pick the eye off the paper. Put in place. Make sure they're even. Now we're going to come in with our ultra fine mono. Some soft wraps at the back. Now we just bind down the eyes. Again, as with the black thread, I'm going to do my whip finish at the back of the head this time. Okay, now for our UV glue. Now for some top coat. Okay, there's our black-nosed dace. It's quite a nice little streamer pattern. It, as I say, it works for a broad variety of species. I have a friend who's a big believer in this pattern for steelhead, and it works just fine. And as I say, you just keep it sort of moderate sized. You don't want it super long, super big, too thick. But it does a good job of imitating a variety of species. And as I say, with that nice fluffy red tail, trout love red. You can't lose. So give it a try, the black-nosed dace. Cheers.